Hey guys, welcome to Unit 3, Lesson 4, and this is going to be the last lesson for this week at least. So this is a new method of solving quadratics, and it's called completing the square. You have seen it before. It's not everyone's favorite method, but it is pretty reliable for most of the situations that we have with quadratics. Okay, so what we are trying to get is the form of what is called a perfect square trinomial. Now, a perfect square trinomial, there's the sum, which is this one right here where we're adding everything, and then there's the difference where the first one is subtracting and the second one is addition. Okay, so we're going to have both situations with these types of problems. And it's a trinomial because we have 1, 2, 3 terms. So just to review, ways to solve quadratic equations that we have learned in the past are factoring, inverse operations, which was like the square rooting method, and then quadratic formula, which was another video we've already done. The fourth one is completing the square, and that is this new method. Okay, so here's our first example, and we're just looking at the pattern of this. So it says complete the square and write in factored form. So the instructions on the right side say take 1/2 of b and square it. The b value, remember, it's always ax squared plus bx, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So the b value is what's in front of the x. So in this case, it's 6. So we take 1/2 of 6, so 6 divided by 2, and then square it. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 3 squared is 9. So right there, we completed the square. X squared plus 6x plus 9 equals x plus 3 times x plus 3. Okay, we want to get it into this pattern here, where it's the same binomial multiplying by itself. So if we look down here, we have x minus 4 squared is equal to x squared minus 8x plus something. So negative 8 is the b value, so just going to do the exact same thing again. Negative 4 divided by 2 equals, negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. But when we square a negative number, we still get a positive. So we end up with plus 4 right there. Actually, I messed that up. I took negative, it should have been negative 8 here. So I got to erase this because that's the b value. Then we divide it by 2. We get negative 4. And when you square negative 4, we get positive 16. All right, so now let's keep practicing that a little bit more. Complete the square and show what the perfect square is. So x squared plus 12x, and this is going to be plus a number. It's always going to be plus a number if we do it correctly for the second part of it. So 1/2 of 12 would be 6, and 6 squared would be 12 divided by 2. Would give us 6. 6 squared would give us 36, so it's plus 36. 1/2 of 14 would be 7, and 7 squared is 49. And then 1/2 of negative 10 would be negative 5. Square that, we get 25. So now, so the perfect square for each of these was plus 36, plus 49, and plus 25. What we could rewrite these as, and this is what we got to get used to doing, is going to be in this form of x, 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 and it's either going to be plus some number or minus some number. So in this case, 36, what is the perfect square that gets us 36? It is 6, signs are both positive, so it's plus 6. Then we look at this next one. The perfect square that gets us 49 is 7. Signs are both positive, so we get plus 7. And the final one, the number that gets us to 25 when we square it, is 5, but this sign here is negative, and that means that it's going to be a negative 5. And then these are squared. I forgot to put that up there. Okay. Now, this is just recognizing the pattern. This actually isn't any of the solving part. It's just to practice the pattern recognition. So the steps for completing the square is first off, divide by a only if a isn't 1. So we always want the coefficient of the x squared, which would be right here, to be 1. Then for number 2, we got to move c to one side by itself. So move the constant to the other side. And take b, divide it by 2, and square it, which is the completing the square, what we were practicing up above. And then we're going to just finish off the rest of these process to get the answer. So let me walk you through it here. So step 1, the a value is 1, so we don't need to do anything there. Step 2, we need to move c to one side by itself. So let's add 16 to both sides. We get x squared minus 6x equals 0. I'm going to leave a little bit of space here. Okay, so, or not equals 0, equals 16, because we added 16 to the other side. So now, what we want to do is take b and divide it by 2. So negative 6 is the b. I'm going to do this off to the side here. So negative 6 divided by 2 squared is going to be negative 3 squared, which equals positive 9. So the reason I left some space is because that's what I got to add right here, plus 9, like what we were doing up above. But what I do to one side, I actually have to do to the other. So I need to add 9 to both sides. Okay? Now that I've completed the square like that, I need to actually, what I'm going to do here is factor this, because I'm going to get the double parenthesis. The right side, 16 plus 9 is 25. So when we factor, we got to be confident in this. Factors of 9 that combine to make negative 6. So remember, it comes from 9 being a perfect square because we're completing the square. So if you take the square root of 9, it's 3 and 3. This sign is negative, so both of the signs are negative. But now, since it's x minus 3 times x minus 3, we can rewrite that as x minus 3 squared equal to 25. So we've done step 4, add that value to both sides. We added 9 to both sides. Number 5, write one side as a perfect square. That's what this side right here is. We changed it to a square. Now we need to take the square root of both sides. So let me just erase that here. Because now that I have it in the perfect square form, I'm going to get x minus 3 equals, and it's going to be plus or minus because we're solving for x squared. The square root of 25 is 5. But now to get x by itself, we need to add 3 to both sides. So if I plus 3, I get 3 plus or minus 5. So there's two different solutions. 3 plus 5 is 8, and then 3 minus 5 is negative 2. We do have to separate these out. We don't want to leave it as the plus or minus form in this instance because we can actually combine the numbers together. All right, let's do some more practice with this. It feels really weird. It's weird to teach this, not in person, but we will keep practicing till we get the idea. So this next example, first thing is check the a value. Since it's 1, we don't have to do anything special. So next we want to add the constant to both sides. So we get x squared plus 4x. I'm going to leave some space because I know I need to add a number. So off to the side here, the next step is to take the b value, divide it by 2, and square it. So the b value is 4. 4 divided by 2 squared. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 2 squared equals 4. So we're going to add 4 to both sides. Next, what we need to do is I'm going to do the 2 sets of parentheses. Six plus 4 is 10. On the left side, we know it goes x and x when I factor this. 4 is a perfect square, comes from 2 and 2. Signs are the same, both positive, so it's plus 2, plus 2. But since I'm multiplying by the same thing, I can rewrite this as x plus 2 squared. Now that I have it in the perfect square, I take the square root of both sides, and we are going to get x plus 2 equals plus or minus, because there's going to be 2 solutions, the square root of 10. Now the square root of 10, we can actually not break that up. It's not a perfect square, and it doesn't have any factors that are perfect squares. So to get x by itself, I'm just going to subtract 2 from both sides. I get x equals -2 plus or minus the square root of 10. Now you can leave your answer like this because you can't combine -2 and square root of 10. Those numbers just won't combine, so we can just leave it. Whereas the one before, we actually could add and subtract 3 and 5. That's why we did combine them. All right, we got 2 more examples here. Number 5, -4x squared plus 4x plus 2 equals 0. Now, -4 is the a value, so we need to actually divide everything on the left and right side by -4, because we would need to get our a value equal to 1. So this ends up becoming x squared minus x, and then 2 divided by -4 is minus 1/2 equal to 0. So then what we do is, we want to add the 1/2 to both sides because we want to get that constant. I'm going to rewrite this down here. So x squared minus x equals, leave a little bit of space, positive 1/2. So let's complete the square. This right here tells us that our b value is -1. So it's -1 divided by 2 squared. When you square a fraction, you just square the top and the bottom. So -1 squared is 1, but 2 squared is 4. So we get 1/4 is what we're adding to both sides. Now this gets a little tricky because we're working with fractions. I understand that. So we need to do the double parenthesis because we're going to factor the left side. 1/2 plus 1/4. Well, 1/2 is the same as 2/4, and 2/4 plus 1/4 is 3/4. So we know it's x and x. Now the thing is, 1/4 actually is a perfect square. If you think back, how did we get 1/4 in the first place? It's because we squared 1/2. So it's 1/2, 1/2, and our sign is negative because we get negative x right there. So it's x minus 1/2 and x minus 1/2. So then what we do after that is we rewrite it as the perfect square. So x minus 1/2 squared equals 3/4. Take the square root of both sides. We get x minus 1/2 equals plus or minus the square root of 3/4. Now the square root of 3/4 we can actually rewrite. This is a trick for rewriting fractions. You can separate it out as the square root of 3 divided by the square root of 4. And we actually know what the square root of 4 is. Square root of 3 is not a nice number. So when we add 1/2 to both sides, this is what it'll look like. X equals 1/2 plus or minus the square root of 3 over 2, because the square root of 4 is 2. And we can leave our answer right there like that. Now the last one, this one's a little bit trickier because one, our a value is not 1, and not everything's on the same side. So let's actually move that 10x to the other side by subtracting 10x. So now we have 5x squared minus 10x plus 20 equals 0. Let's divide everything by 5. We get x squared minus 2x plus 4 equals 0. We got to subtract 4 from both sides. Now we have x squared minus 2x, leave a little bit of space so I can complete the square, equals -4. My b value is -2, so I got to divide that by 2 and square it. I get -1 squared, which equals 1. So I add 1 to both sides, plus 1 to both sides. Now I need to rewrite this. I get -3, -4 plus 1. Now when I factor this time on the left side, it's still x and x, but I look at this number here. So 1 is technically a perfect square. This one's always a little tricky. 1 times 1 is how we get 1 squared. So it's 1 and 1. Signs are the same, both negative, because of this sign right here. So it's x minus 1, x minus 1. We change that into a squared form, and then we take the square root of both sides. x minus 1 equals, now the square root of negative 3, we're going to rewrite that as plus or minus because we took the square root. We're going to leave the 3 inside, but we're going to pull out an I since we're taking the square root of a negative number. So now I add 1 to both sides, and my final answer is x equals 1 plus or minus I square root of 3. Now, this is a tough lesson if you don't understand the factoring side of things. It's a tough lesson in general, and it's the toughest one that we'll have for this unit. So if this made sense and you were able to follow along with the pattern, you're doing pretty well. So don't panic. We are going to go over these in class. Just be willing to ask questions and identify the problems that you're really struggling with. So if there's any here, I'm guessing example 5 is the one that has fractions that's a little confusing. So please just bring that up and I'll gladly talk about that in class. But go ahead and try the student problem.